Hello, this is a short video on for session 8 of project on presenting results. You'll find the slides on the VLE and on Teams. That's just a summary of what you've got to do. Obviously, we're past the Viva now, but you're looking at your dissertation submission on the 12th of May. This is where you might be now. You may be beyond this, you may not have completed your practical research yet. Only you will know that through discussion with your dissertation supervisor. So you may have already observed some pupils and some teachers, or you may have gathered some questionnaire responses, or you may have carried out some interviews, for example. So, what are you trying to do with your research? So the purpose of your research report is to answer your research question. Here are some examples. If your research question is asking what are Year 4 pupils' views on geography lessons, your results will indicate Year 4 pupils' views on geography lessons. It's as simple as that. So the results will give you data which will enable you to a greater or lesser extent answer your research question. If your research question is how do teachers feel about use of play in the early years, you will have talked to teachers about their feelings about play in the early years. If your research is about, for example, effective approaches to supporting pupils with autism or pupils on the autistic spectrum, you will have found out about some approaches that are used. Maybe you've talked to teachers. You'll look at evidence that shows how effective they are, and it might be that you've got some views of teachers and or pupils. For example, what are you looking for? Well, one of the things that will help you bring your results in your discussion together will be patterns. And Lambert talks about the idea of patterns or common characteristics or common themes in your findings, in your results. Let's look at an example of that. So let's say I did a series of interviews or surveys with pupils to try and find out about attitudes towards geography. Okay, so I've talked to this imaginary group of 9 pupils, 4 boys and 5 girls, and these pupils have all expressed negative feelings about geography, and they've given me some more information. So boy A has said, well, it's boring. Boy B has said it's difficult. Boy C, I'd rather play football. So lots of different answers, and I'm trying to kind of organize this in a way that make my results easier to present. So I've looked for some patterns. So a number of pupils have said something which indicates that they are disengaged in a fairly unspecified way by the subject. They're not engaged by the subject. Boy A says it's boring. Girl B says it's boring. There's a pattern here. One child talks about subject knowledge, it's difficult. Some of the children talk about having other preferences. So boy C, he wants to play football. That's it. This girl talks about it being irrelevant, and one pupil here says that the teacher doesn't actually even like it themselves. So there's lots of stuff about disengagement, but there are different characteristics of this disengagement. So sometimes it's unspecific, it's boring. Sometimes it's more specific, so this child would rather do something else. This child has other preferences. this child says it's to do with the lack of relevance of the subject. So I'm sorting them out. There's a lot of disengagement. I don't like geography because I'm not engaged, and there are different reasons why these particular people are not engaged. And there are some other things that come in. So girl E and boy B talk about difficulty. Okay. Note that these opinions that the participants are expressing are simply what the participants say. They're not facts. These are just simply the responses of the participants to my questions. Get rid of that. Yes. How might I present that? Well, I could present it like this. I could create a graph or a bar chart like this with little towers there indicating those responses. So I could use a quantitative approach for presenting my results. And I've asked the question with this slide, what are the problems with this? Well, the problems with this are fairly simple. I've actually only got a very small number of participants. So I've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got 9 participants, as I said before, 4 boys and 5 girls. But this is a bit misleading, isn't it? Because it suggests here that the subject knowledge issue is much more significant than the other preferences issue or the teacher disengagement issue. But actually, these massive differences aren't really very different. This is 1 pupil, and this is 3 pupils. So the problem with using this type of graphic representation to communicate your results can mean that you give an inaccurate or a misleading idea of what you have found out. It suggests bigger differences than there really are. And I've only talked to 9 pupils, so this type of approach isn't necessarily very helpful. So what to do instead? Well, this would be a more useful approach, this style. 9 pupils expressed negative feelings about geography with no significant difference between girls' and boys' responses. So I'm summarising it in sentences. 6 of these indicate an apparent lack of engagement with the subject or with lessons. 2, for example, indicated that they did not feel the subject was relevant. Girl C's response exemplifies this. So that phrase is very useful. The idea of one participant's response exemplifying what several participants have said. The word exemplifies means gives an example of. So girl C's response said, girl C said, why should I know about volcanoes? Basically what she was saying is it's not relevant. And a number of people said it's not relevant. And girl C added, why should I know about volcanoes? To explain why she felt it was irrelevant. 2 pupils indicate unspecified disengagement, both responding with it's boring. 1 articulated an apparent preference for football. Another child felt that the teacher doesn't even like it. Brackets geography. I put brackets in geography because it's not clear from what the pupil said what it is, the word it. I need to be clear about what the word it refers to. Okay? A couple of points about that. So note the language that I've used in this example. Indicate. I'm not using the word prove anywhere. Prove doesn't belong anywhere in your report. Indicate or suggest. That's the kind of language that you need to use when you're presenting your results. Okay, it's the importance of caution. It's the importance of uncertainty when you are presenting your results. So indicate. I've used that several times there. 2, for example, 2 indicated. 2 pupils indicate. That repeated use of indicate is absolutely fine. The other word that I think is useful to point out here is the word apparent. So apparent, the word apparent means it appears that. So it appears that there is a lack of engagement, but I'm not saying it's a fact that there's a lack of engagement. If you think about it, if I ask a group of pupils about how they feel about a subject, some of them might say, I don't like that subject because they don't like that subject. And some of them might say, I don't like that subject because they like the sound of saying, I don't like that subject. You know, they might say, I don't like that subject because they're trying to do something else. Maybe they're giving the sense of, it's not cool enough for me. So they might be saying, I don't like that subject, but actually they do like that subject. This is a problem with research. We're not inside our participants' heads. We're relying on what they tell us. So that's why the word apparent is quite useful. Apparent means it appears. So it appears that there is a lack of engagement, but I don't know that that's a fact. So remember that you'll come across this with all of your participants. They will say things, you'll ask them for their opinions about things, and they will tell you things, and these things might be things that they believe very, very strongly. They might be accounts of things that they do actually, or they might be telling you things which they think they believe but don't actually believe regularly, or they might be telling you things which they think you might want to hear. That's the nature of this type of research. Uncertainty, caution, these are important things to be clear about in your discussion section when you're discussing your results. So, when discussing results, the evidence you have collected will probably be from a specific setting and apply to a specific group of pupils or teachers. Okay, so the responses you get apply only to those specific pupils or teachers or parents. So be careful when you're discussing your results, and you will discuss your results in I've suggested a results and discussion chapter. When you're discussing those results, bear that in mind, that you're not carrying out a research across the UK with thousands of participants. The research you have carried out has been with a limited number of participants, probably in a specific setting. So caution is important. Second point here, research into education is not scientifically precise. Your findings will suggest things. They will indicate patterns, but they will not allow you to make absolutely firm conclusions. You're not proving anything. Your conclusions from your research are going to be cautious. It seems that. It appears that. So be careful with how you use language in your results and discussion section. And note, just to emphasize there, discuss results in the discussion section, not in the results section. Or combine the results and discussion in a single chapter called results and discussion, or findings and discussion. That would be fine. That's the dog, excuse me. Important, discussing results. When you're writing the discussion section, avoid the use of the word prove. I've made that point already. Avoid or be very careful with synonyms of prove, such as show or demonstrate. All of those words suggest that you're doing something, you found out something pretty definite. You're giving a very clear link between one thing and another, and there are no other possibilities. And this kind of proof we don't really do that within education, within this field. Our conclusions need to be much more cautious. So use language which indicates caution in reaching conclusions, and which show that you have understood that your cautious findings only apply to a particular setting or to those particular participants. So what you're trying to do in your discussion section is demonstrate that you understand that what you have found, your conclusions are cautious. And by showing caution, you are demonstrating critical thinking. And critical thinking means higher marks. Okay? Caution equals critical thinking equals higher marks. Okay? For example, some of the kind of language you might use, pupils' responses to the questionnaire suggest that. Teacher A's comment appears to support the idea that. Finally, pupils with EAL in this class, very specific there, pupils with EAL in this class seem to prefer this type of approach. See how specific the language is. Not pupils with EAL in the UK, or not even pupils with EAL seem to prefer this type of approach, because that would suggest that you've done research much more broadly. It's unlikely that you've done research much more broadly. Your research will have been carried out with a very small range of participants. So pupils with EAL in my research project, pupils with EAL who I interviewed seem to prefer this type of approach. Be really clear about the narrowness of your research focus. And again, that's about criticality. And a couple of references there. Just a reminder, that's how you set out a reference list.